I wish I could say, yeah, we made that one great big life-changing decision and that's that. We'll never have to face fears again in our life. And, it's all roses and jumping around and we're all having fun. And digital nomadery is the only thing for everyone. And it's not the case.
Hey there, I'm Goli Kalkaran, and this is Lessons from a Quitter, where we believe that it's never too late to start over. No matter how much time or money you've spent getting to where you are, if ultimately you are not happy, then it's time to get out. If you're feeling stuck and you feel like there's gotta be more, there's gotta be a way to feel fulfilled and excited about what you do, then this is the podcast for you. Each week, I will sit down with an inspiring guest who quit their professional career in order to forge their own path and create a life that they love. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so happy to have you here. We are closing in on the end of the year. So is everybody doing like resolutions and goal setting and all that great stuff? I am. I know it gets a bad rap. Sometimes people make fun of the new year, new you things, but I don't think the problem is setting goals. It's not sticking to them. And I'm going to do an episode next week. It'll just be me. It'll be on Christmas, where I talk more about how you can set more realistic goals and things that you will stick to and how to make goal setting work for you as opposed to just doing it once a year and kind of forgetting about it. So tune in next week and we'll talk a little bit about how you can make 2019 better. Speaking of that, I think one of the goals, I talk about all the time, and I think it should be everybody's goal, is to work more on mindset and our thought processes. And it's funny, I was watching recently the HBO documentary on Serena Williams. It's a 5-part series, mostly focusing on how, her birthing story and how she was trying to get back after giving birth. But what struck me throughout the whole series was just the level of self-doubt that she had. I mean, I just didn't expect it from the greatest female tennis player and arguably one of the greatest athletes of all time to be racked with like self-doubt and not think that she could do something that she's done at such an incredible level for so long. When you start thinking about these athletes and how many decades they've done these physical acts, like these repetitive motions they've practiced since they were children. And yet, clearly, the psychological component is a huge one. And so that's why a lot of them go to like sports psychologists and they work on their, not psyching themselves out and being able to keep their thoughts at a minimum to let their body kind of do what it knows how to do. And it just got me thinking, if she has that much self-doubt, like what chance do the rest of us have? Like seriously, if we don't really focus on it, I think it overtakes you. And I just read this statistic that it was something like we can have up to 60,000 thoughts a day. It's like 20 to 60,000. But the interesting thing is that like 95% of those thoughts are the same thoughts you had the day before. So we don't realize what's happening in our subconscious. It's just this loop that's running every single day and it compounds on itself. We don't check it, so it grows louder and louder, and everybody has experienced it. Everybody knows it. Like this voice, this nagging voice, whatever it is, it gets stronger as you get older. And the thing is, it can be checked. So I would say that, everybody's goal should be to work a little bit more on your mentality and your thoughts and how to maybe inject it a little bit more with positivity and stopping the negative thoughts and working on affirmations and those kind of things to really help you get to where you want to go. Physically, we can all do most of the stuff we want to do. You can physically go in and quit your job or start a business, whatever it is. It's mentally that it stops you. So that's one of my goals, and I will talk about it more on the next episode. But for today's episode, I'm really excited to jump in and talk to Daniel Prince. Daniel's story is really unique because he's doing what a lot of people are doing now, but he did it 4 years ago when it wasn't as popular and it was a lot more difficult. But he is now an investor, startup advisor, and author of the book Choose Life. After enduring an 18-year career in finance, Daniel and his wife, Claire, they decided to sell everything, leave everything they knew, and travel around the world with their 4 children. and they lived via the sharing economy, doing work remotely. Now, there's a huge remote work life movement happening right now. And it's still, I would say, majority comprised of people that are single or young couples. As any parent that's gone on vacation knows how hard it is to travel with kids, let alone live on the road and travel for, years at a time. And they did that. The princes did it for 2.5 years. And we'll talk to him about how he did it and his experience with it. His popular blog, Princes Off the Grid, drew attention from the global press, leading to appearances in magazines, newspapers, award-winning blogs, and on podcasts. Along with his book, he has inspired a lot of people, a lot of families, to follow in his footsteps and create a more fulfilling life. He's an advocate of the sharing and gig economy, and he's advising and investing in businesses that seek to disrupt legacy business practices. He's now a part of a team building Zingle, a social impact platform that aims to help businesses grow by offering the opportunity to connect with highly qualified, experienced, and skilled professionals. We'll get into all of that and what he's doing now. I am super excited, so let's jump in and talk to Daniel. Hi, Daniel. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hey, great to be here. Thank you for reaching out and getting in touch.
Yeah, I'm really excited to jump into your story. I think there are so many people that are interested in this nomadic digital lifestyle and being able to work everywhere. And so the fact that you've done it with kids is super exciting. So I want to get into how you did all that stuff. But why don't you let us know a little bit about your career and what you were doing at the time before you decided to make this jump?
Yeah, well, it started back in after I left college. I went into the financial markets in London, which pretty much what a lot of people do from the southeast of England. They look for jobs in the big smoke in the city of London. And I ended up following my father's footsteps in the financial world and got the opportunity in the late 90s, 99, to follow my career in foreign exchange at that point out to Singapore. And as many other expatriates probably attest to, you go on a 2-year contract, and before you know it, you're there for 15 years, and you've built a family and you've built a career. I mean, that whizzed past so quickly. But that was my main career, was always in finance.
How did you start kind of coming up with this idea or thinking about making this huge life change of leaving all of that to travel the world with your family?
My business was changing. The career that I'd started and I'd grown up loving was kind of like waning off. And I guess that's due in huge part to the family lifestyle that we were creating. And all of a sudden, the work-life balance was just completely off. We had 2 kids, young, like 5 and 3. And then all of a sudden, we had the surprise news of a twin pregnancy coming our way. So that completely, that put life completely upside down. And we were always trying to figure out, okay, what's the next step? This isn't really working anymore. There's something amiss. And I was at lunch with a friend of mine, and we were just talking through different scenarios. There's got to be a better way. What can I do? What can I put in place? Where can I go next? What's the big idea? And he pointed me in the direction of Tim Ferriss's book, The 4-Hour Workweek, which just, and I've got to say here, I never ever read those kind of books,
right.
And I took the advice with a grain of salt. But for whatever reason, I went out and bought that book, and I read that book 5 times in as many months. So I picked it up in November 2013. And by March of 2014, my wife and I had given our landlord, we'd basically handed the contract back. We'd given notice on our rent, and we'd pretty much sold as much as we could that we owned and decided to go traveling with the kids. So that was the power of that book.
Yeah.
Now, I wouldn't say that's going to have the same effect on everybody. It's just that must have been like the absolute perfect time in my life to read that message,
right.
and look at life completely differently.
It's funny that you say that, because that was the book that literally started me on the path of quitting law as well. It was the first book I read. And I never read self-help books. I never read like any of the part of that genre. And I remember being blown away. I mean, I didn't do anything nearly as cool as what you did and go travel the world, but I remember it opening me up to this whole world that like I didn't know it was possible to live another way. And so for anybody that's kind of like stuck in that place, I have it on my resources page at lessonsfromaquitter.com. You should absolutely check it out. I do think that he provides such an interesting way to look at life and work and how to balance all that. So I felt the same way. But I think it's really interesting because what you're saying, most people, when they have the news of, a set of twins coming, you hunker down more, it's like the security, and there's more stress about how are you going to pay for 4 kids? I don't think that the natural inclination is like, now that we have 4 small children, let's get up and sell everything and go travel the world. So I'm sure there was the fear or the thoughts of like, this is crazy, or what are we doing? So how did you get over that to kind of decide that this is what you wanted to do?
Yeah, it's a great question. Complete madness looking back on it. I think the fear of sitting in the same seat at the same desk for the next 20 to 25 was probably more fearful than, taking the risk to get away from it. And I remember one of the bosses was in town from New York. He was doing one-on-ones with everybody. And I remember him saying at some stage, I heard the news about the twins. That's great to hear because that'll keep you in your seat for a little bit longer and working harder. And I was like, that was just a weird thing to say. And then when they come along and you realize that work-life balance thing is just completely off. You're like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I've got these kids at home and I'm just never seeing them. I'm never spending any time with them. The time that my wife was getting to spend with them was spent on motherly duties, and that wasn't great time either.
Right.
So we just figured something needs to change. And if it doesn't work, you can always go back. If you don't even enjoy it, you can always go back. You might have to start at a different place or something, but there's always a way. There's always a network. So I did the fear setting exercise that Tim talks about in his book. And obviously, I think everybody's biggest fear is stepping away from their job, stepping away from their workplace, their identity, the sunk cost of their education, or of like the 10 to 15 years of getting where they've got to be, that VP title on their business card, whatever, that they just cannot give up.
Yeah. And
stepping away from that and thinking to yourself, okay, I could be living under a bridge in a year, unable to feed my family, which was like everybody's biggest fear. And then when you realize like the likelihood of that happening is almost zero,
right,
then you can start planning, on top of that and figuring out, okay, the risk isn't actually as big as you perceive,
right,
or society perceives for you in many cases.
I love that you, like everything you just said, but one of the things that a lot of people struggle with is, can you just go back? I agree with you that I think we make it a much bigger deal than it is. Like you may, once you get off this corporate ladder, maybe you have to start a little bit further down. But people are paralyzed by this idea that if you leave, you will never get a job when you come back. And so when you were thinking about that, did you know that like you could go back to finance and probably find a job? Or was it, sort of, I'll figure it out, even if it's not in finance, I'll figure something else out?
I figured if the worst came to the worst and we weren't enjoying what we were doing and I needed to get back into an employment, it would take a hell of a lot of phone calls. And if I was willing to put in a hell of a lot of phone calls and just follow the breadcrumbs, then something would come up.
Right.
And what actually happened was the complete opposite. Within 6 months of leaving and being gone, I think there were like 2 or 3 job offers. And it was like, oh man, I was actually afraid of this.
I know.
And then the reverse happens because you're like, oh, this is a great opportunity. Wow, I would have loved to have looked into that, if I was still working in the industry. And it would have been a different country and a different market. And then you start going down that road of thought, and it's even more difficult to start turning them down, even though you've validated your whole choice. You're still turning down gainful employment and opportunities at different companies because we've been all so conditioned our whole educational lives by society about, unless you're working, unless you're employed, you're worthless. You're not contributing to like the global economy, I suppose. Your social structure is completely off. You feel as though people are judging you for not being employed. You don't have an identity. The loss of identity, I'm sure you suffered it as well, was huge. It was a strange one.
It is. I don't think I was as prepared because I had never even thought about how it feels when someone asks you what you do and you don't have like a straight answer and how awkward that conversation can be. And I started finding myself in that would give me anxiety about, what am I doing? But I mean, I think that what you said earlier is that fear of, okay, I don't want to be doing this for the next 25 years. I mean, I think once you hone in on that, like nothing else matters. Once you get to that first awkward conversation and then you realize, all right, well, I don't need to explain myself. Like, I just don't want to be doing this anymore.
I was totally unprepared for that as well. I thought this is going to be great. I'm just going to walk off, never look back and travel the world. And, it's all going to be roses. And that's fine for about the first month to 6 weeks. Then your monkey brain takes over and says, hey, this family vacation's a little bit long. Aren't you being a little bit lazy and unproductive? And,
Yeah.
And I heard a quote. Well, it was a podcast I was listening to. Naval Ravikant. I don't know if you've heard of him or listened to any of his podcasts before. He summed it up perfectly. And he said, I hope I get this right. Memories and identities are burdens of the past that prevent us from living in the present. And I thought that was so smack bang on. It's like, wow. And then I could just let go after that. In each time my old identity or memories come back, I just think of that, like, right, okay, just that's done. That's what you were. That's over with. Now it's now and what you're building for the future and what you want to become next.
Yes, so much. Yes. It's funny when you take a step back and when you read these books or listen to, I know you have a TED Talk on your website that I'll link to in the show notes. And he talks about it in the sense that it's this life that's sort of laid out for you and you're in it. And it's funny because you feel the need to keep up with it, even if it wasn't something that you choose for yourself or that you like, So the weirdest like cognitive dissidence is where like you don't want it, but you feel so tied to it that saying you're not a lawyer or trying to explain that is harder, and worrying about what other people think and worrying about what people will judge you has such strong power over us. We all hear the statistics of people in these jobs that are suicidal and depressed and anxious and, on drugs and alcohol, whatever, all this other stuff. And yet, I mean, it's that powerful of a control that you just feel like your worth is tied into that. And if you're not doing that, then what are you?
Yeah, precisely. It's a tough one to overcome. It really is.
And so how did you guys, though, like logistically, I mean, how did you start planning or figuring out how to travel and live with 4 small children, and both like financially and just like logistically, like what were you guys doing?
Yeah, the amount of sleepless nights over that was crazy. Right. Okay. Yeah. How are we going to make this? How are we going to make this work? Is taking the kids out of school going to damage their education, damage them psychologically? All of these, parental doubts and anxieties that everybody goes through. So this was March 2014, and the sharing economy was just really starting to take a real boom. And when we had moved over to Asia, we'd been there like 3 or 4 years or so. We bought an investment property in Thailand on a tiny island called Koh Samui. And we still had the property. And I'd started reading about different ways to travel and how families were traveling. And I'd started reaching out to a few people that were writing blogs about homeschooling and traveling. And there was only very few at the time. And I found a guy called Brandon Pierce via Tim Ferriss's blog, actually, and reached out to him. And he was gracious enough to come back with lots of advice, he smashed a lot of doubts and a lot of fears, especially around like the kids' education, because they had 3 young kids and they were doing it. And so I listed the house on lovehomeswap.com. It's a British site. And within 2 weeks or so, we were getting a lot of interest from people that from all over the world that were interested in swapping their houses so we could go and stay in their house. And what we thought we might be able to just budget for 9 months to a year's travel and then go find a job again actually turned into, wow, this is way more sustainable than we thought, because pretty much all of the accommodation turned out just to be a home swap or a free accommodation, essentially. So we ended up going far longer than we imagined and traveling far wider than we ever thought. For about 2.5 years, just over 2.5 years, we were bouncing around travel nonstop.
Wow.
So again, it's not until you step out of the realms of your comfort and start looking for different ways and connecting with different people that all of a sudden the world just opens up. It feels like magic, but it was there all along,
right.
But you were just blinkered in your career and you weren't looking for any different paths.
Absolutely. I think it's like when you have your head down, you don't see all the opportunities that are there. And it's like as soon as you kind of step out of that comfort zone, there's things that is like it seems like it magically appears, but it's there if you decide to take it. And so when you were in your job, did you know of like work that you could do remotely, or was that all stuff that you figured out after you kind of made this jump?
No, I figured that out afterwards. I wish I could have come up with the online business idea to bring in some kind of cash whilst we were on the road. But
Right.
no, it's just a complete jump with the knowledge of, okay, we've got some savings. Let's use those. Let's live a little now.
Mm-hmm.
We can always, I'm sure, find another way to make some money.
Right.
And that's when I started figuring out so I do now online consulting, one-to-one consulting with primarily startups at the moment, based out of the UK, but can work with anybody anywhere. That's the beauty of it. I just wanted to figure out something that I could do from a laptop.
Yeah.
And then I'm good to go at any stage, and can connect with whoever I need to connect with in any part of the world at any time, which was far more appealing to dragging myself back to a desk.
Yeah. The reason I think that's so important is I think a lot of people I talk to are now aware of this kind of remote living and all these digital nomads. And the number one thing I hear is a lot of people say, well, like, I don't do anything where I can do that, or I don't know what I would do, because obviously there are people that in their current jobs can maybe do that. Like they are, internet business owners or software developers or whatnot. But I do think that for a lot of people, like you were just saying, until you go outside of your comfort zone, you won't know like how your skills can be transferable to something that is online. But like it may not seem viable, but there are so many things that you can now do that you can kind of figure it out. And so I love that you were saying that that's sort of how you did it, because I think that's what I try to tell people. But I know that the fear of like, well, what if I don't find anything and then I can never make money?
Right, exactly. You've hit the nail on the head. I had no idea that I'd be of use to anybody in the field that they're in at the moment, but it's making a difference. I'm enjoying the work, and it's gratifying on both sides of the coin. It helps me and it helps the companies that I'm working with and the individuals. So I had no idea that was inside me.
Right.
It's just something that came to the surface, which you just discover.
Yeah. And so you said you traveled for about 2.5 years. And then so now are you guys settled down somewhere?
Yes, we stopped traveling for a little while and we rented a place in France.
Wow.
It sounds like, amazing lifestyle. It was an amazing lifestyle, but when you're traveling, every 2 weeks you're going a different place, a different place, a different place.
Right.
But, the 6 of us, it takes its toll.
Yeah.
And the kids were actually at a stage where they're asking to go back to school, which we were like, huh? Okay. Okay. And so we made the decision, right, if we're going to do this, if we're going to take a rest and the kids are going to go back to school, let's do it somewhere where we can give them the gift of another language and go to school and learn a language by immersion rather than go to an English-speaking country. Claire and I, my wife, and I decided if there's one thing in life that we could gift our children, it would be the ability to speak another language.
Right.
We put that to the oldest two, and we were in France at the time. They said, well, we love it here, and French sounds great, so let's do that. They're now both fluent.
Wow.
The younger two are almost there as well. I wish I could say the same for my wife and I.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing the things it opens up you to. And I think that a lot of people I've met that are doing these types of either a year abroad or whatnot, a lot of times we make a decision and then either we think there's pressure from outside. It's like, oh, if I'm going to be a traveler, like then that's what we do as a family. But I mean, I think that it's a great example that you can do it for as long as it works for you. And then when that doesn't work, then you try something else. I mean, the whole point of this podcast is I think people in traditional careers are so used to like having a 5-year plan and a 10-year plan. And I think now for me, after having gone through that transition of leaving, that seems insane because it seems like, how do you know what you're going to be doing in 5 years or 10 years? So much can change. Hopefully so much will change. And so I love that it's like you guys traveled and it takes a toll, obviously, with small children. And you randomly ended up in France. Like that's such a cool thing. And who knows if, in 5 years where you will be.
We don't know. It's a great question. We don't know where we'll be as of July because that's when the rent is up. So we don't even know. Maybe we'll be able to renew. Maybe we will not. We won't be able to. Maybe we'll look for a new house. Maybe we'll look for a different country.
Yeah.
That's it's all very, But that can be unsettling as well in a way. And that's all, you're always fighting those demons in your own mind of the unsettled nature of everything. It is, again, is that the right thing to be doing? It's against the social norms, right?
Right. Do you find it easier? Like, is it working on a muscle where taking those risks are easier? Or do you find that you kind of butt up against those same limiting beliefs and fears and all that every time you're making these decisions?
Always butting up against them. Always. I wish I could say, yeah, we made that one great big life-changing decision and that's that. We'll never have to face fears again in our life. And, it's all roses and jumping around and we're all having fun. And digital nomadery is the only thing for everyone. And it's not the case. It's every time there's a new decision to be made, it's straight back to those fears and the self-doubts. And we were talking a little bit about this before the podcast. And so, I wrote a book about our travels because we were just getting asked so much time. And the blog that we'd started was just only ever as like a family blog to keep people updated on where we were, friends and family. But it just started randomly attracting people. And obviously people were out there looking for this kind of validation. And the blog and our story culminated into a book. But when I was writing the book, I'd have to think half done, 3/4 of the way done, almost done. And at each point, who do you think you are? What makes you so special? Why do you think you can, write a book? You were never good at English at school. You were only ever in the middle class. You never got an A for anything. Who's going to read this? What are your ex-colleagues going to think? What are your family going to think? The amount of times I almost stopped that project was crazy. And I don't know if you know Seth Godin.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So I listened to a Seth Godin podcast interview right during these dark days of this project, and he gave his email out on the podcast. And I emailed him with some questions around self-publishing. He was so gracious to come back and respond and help me out with some advice and some links to some blogs he had written a long time ago about self-publishing and the art of writing and who's the writing for. So I actually opened the book with the quote that really pushed me over the line. So ever thankful to Seth. And I sent him a signed copy of the book, which he gratefully received. So,
that's wonderful. No, I think that's a great thing to highlight is that a lot of times, especially in our own heads, like I was just listening to some statistic and it was saying that I think 98 or something, 97% of the thoughts that we have every day are the same thoughts. So it's just like ruminating in your head over and over and over again. And we all know that we have these inner critics. And a lot of times, like it's the meanest voice there, like you'd never talk to somebody else like that. And it just is just constant. And that keeps so many of us. And the thing is a lot of times we think it's just us, but it's everybody at every level, like every major, writer or creator or CEO, whatever, has these constant self-doubts. And it's a matter of like figuring out how to push yourself past it or limiting them or, like silencing them for a little bit because they constantly come back. And I think it's a good point to have because you're not going to get rid of them, but it's once you can become conscious of them and realize that it's not a true thing. It's something that, you've internalized self-doubts we have or insecurities are like intensify in ourselves. And I think a lot of people feel that. And I can't imagine writing a book because there isn't a lot of instant feedback or instant gratification. If I do a podcast, people reach out and, they might like one episode. And so that may propel me to do more. Whereas like when you're writing a book, I mean, you're writing for such a long period of time without anyone ever looking at it. And so I think it's so natural to have all of these doubts of like, why me? There's so many books. Why would anyone want to read this?
Yeah, you're so right. Everybody has that internal narrative. Everybody in the world. Like you just cannot turn it off. And I was never into mindfulness or meditation or anything like that before we left and started going on the travel and trying to just find a way to stop this self-doubt, self-narrative. And it was Headspace, which is a great app that I was put onto, which really opened my eyes to, wow, there is a way to quieten your mind. And, the way he delivers it is so great. And then I'll come back to Naval Ravikant again, a different podcast I was listening to. But I actually wrote this one down. And he nailed it. It was brilliant. And I'll just read it to you.
Yeah,
It's something I go to all the time. The first thing to realize is that you can actually observe your mental state. The advantage of meditation is not that you're suddenly going to gain the superpower to control your internal state. It's that you will recognize just how out of control your mind is. It is like a monkey flinging feces that's running around the room, making trouble, shouting, and breaking things. It's completely uncontrollable. It's an out of control mad person. So whenever I have these self-doubts now, I just think of that. I've got a little picture of a monkey throwing some poo. It's just, to your point, everybody suffers it.
Yeah.
The way society measures success is a whole nother topic, which would probably, we're all trapped in the same kind of treadmill there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's such a great image. So can you tell us what the name of your book is and what it's about?
Absolutely. It's called Choose Life. Well, the longer title is Choose Life, the tools, tricks, and hacks of long-term family travelers, world schoolers, and digital nomads. And I wrote the book that I wish I had in my wife and I's hands when we were in the same situation of making this decision. It is the book that if your listeners are, they've come to the realization that something's off with their work-life balance and they're looking to make a change, they've already done the hard work.
Right.
They've already made the realization. That's the biggest decision. It's like, wow, right, okay, I need to push the button. But then you've got to find that validation. And it's the validation that was missing for me at the time when we were making this decision. I did manage to find it. And I just wanted a piece out there that would help people if they're trying to find a different way. That there are other people out there that have done it. And there's tons more now.
Right.
There's so many more blogs, family travel blogs. Like the term world schooling didn't exist 4 years ago. And it's just now exploded.
Right.
It's a completely different look on education. And homeschooling, that word was always synonymous with weird, unsociable kids or, highly religious families. And it's just also, it's so wrong. And I hope people can look at it with wider eyes. And if they find the book and they get some kind of help from that, that's great. That's my job done.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. I'll link to it in the show notes for anybody that wants to find it. I would recommend everyone picking it up, especially if you're interested in, even if you're not interested in traveling the world, but you feel stuck. I think it could be a huge help. And so, Daniel, what are you doing now? I know that you were saying that you're part of is it a startup or?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's a brand new startup there are 6 of us that are trying to pioneer this thing. We're all invested individually and going to try and be pushing forward. It's called Zyngle, Zyngle, Zyngle.com. We're not launching yet. We're pre-launched. The website's up. You can go and have a look. It's not exactly how we'd want it to be. And we are definitely a ways away from it becoming what we envisage it to be. But the premise is we wanted to create a place for people like yourself, for people like myself that have left the corporate world but want to stay in touch with their skills and their profession and know that they have a lot to offer. So we figure that there's a space in the market where entrepreneurs, whether they're solo entrepreneurs or very small businesses or SMEs or even 5 to 10-year-old businesses that are looking to grow and need help growing and need the professional services of perhaps somebody like yourself, an ex-lawyer, that is able to connect with these people and enter the gig economy on a much higher level than the gig economy is actually available for at the moment. The gig economy has been amazing for if you want to become an Uber driver or work for TaskRabbit or, work as a freelancer on Fiverr or Upwork, or they keep changing names now. But we want to create this gig economy for the highly skilled, highly professional, white-collar worker that is looking to leave their current role and take back a little bit of time for themselves, open up the opportunity to travel with their families if they want, at the very least, but spend more time with their families and just claim back that work-life balance. And we believe there's a big opportunity there. I think, if we look at the demographics, we believe in males, there are tons and tons of guys sitting there in a career that they're just aching to get out of, know that they could help SMEs, help them grow and not charge the ridiculous rates they might be charging under a big banner name of McKinsey or KPMG or something.
Right.
Or if we look at the female demographic, there is so much talent and skill and professional ladies, not in the workplace because they've made the family decision to come and have children.
Right.
Now they're at home. And my God, if we could connect these women to these companies that need their skills but can't afford the ridiculous rates that are out, being charged, or they can't afford to hire you full time, but they need that problem solved for the next 2 to 6 months or something. There's so much talent out there, and there's so many people that can be connected, and we believe that we can build a platform that can do that. And that's what we're excited about, and that's what we're trying to build, and we want people to connect. So if there's anybody out there that is listening, that this sounds cool to you, like it's up your street, you think you might be able to help, or you're interested in signing up, then my email address will be in the show notes, hopefully, Golly, and that'll be my personal email. And reach out because we're looking to connect.
I'll put it in the show notes, and I'll put the website for anybody. I do think that that's going to be, huge, obviously, with this freelancing and gig economy. I think the next step is highly skilled workers. And we actually had, I can't remember the episode number off the top of my head, but we had Lori Rowan on the show, and I will connect you with her because she has basically a freelancing company for lawyers it's mostly in America, but and she started the same way, and it's mostly, started out as women who wanted to be at home more, but were these highly skilled attorneys that wanted to work on their own time, and they've done wonderfully for themselves. And I think that model definitely can be expanded to other fields. So I love this. I think it's going to be huge. So congratulations on that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I'd love to be put in contact.
Yeah.
That'd be a great contact to have.
I definitely will.
We need to network into this new ground of what we're trying to achieve.
Right. Oh, no, I definitely will. I really appreciate your time, Daniel. I think this has been awesome, and you've already given so much advice. But if you had anything, last piece of advice or a resource, maybe another book for somebody that feels really stuck in their corporate life, like they don't want the life they have right now, and they want to make a change, whether that is traveling or not. Any parting words that you would have? Yes, for sure. I can't remember to attribute it to, but there's something I read. I can't remember exactly when in the journey, but how complicit are you in your own unhappiness? And it really does frame your mind to look inside and really figure it out. Like, right? It's I would say that's probably a good place to end it. It's that's a nice punch in the gut. I love that.
Yeah, right. And just think about that and know that there are so many different options open to you, and what you've done in the last 10 to 15, 20 years, whatever it is, that doesn't have to define you.
I love that. We will end on that. Thank you so much, Daniel. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for getting in touch.
Thank you so much for listening. I can't tell you how much it means to me. If you liked the podcast, please rate and review us on iTunes. It'll help other people find the show. If you want to connect or reach out, follow along on Instagram and Facebook at Lessons from a Quitter, and on Twitter at Quitter Podcast. I would love to hear from you guys, and I'll see you on the next episode.